Steph, I know you were rocking some very cool saw kit at Two Oceans recently, which I'm assuming now is your lucky race kit. But talk to me a little bit about why you chose to race in saw.
I just love the quality of saw kit. It's so light and breathable that you forget you're wearing it, which when you're racing is very important because it's one less distraction and you want to be feeling your best on race day. My favourite item though has to be the marathon shorts. There are so many places that you can store your gels and other items without it feeling bulky. They're just so comfortable to do those long runs in. There's a huge range of performance kit in really cool colours and designs that you can check out at sawrunning.com. For some spring training motivation, Saw are rewarding you for hard-earned personal bests whilst wearing a Saw race vest. Run a verified PB between the 1st of March and the 31st of May and get £50 Saw credit. Head to the show notes for details.
Thank you to Saw for sponsoring this episode.
Just the feeling when you go into a race, the world kind of stops. You're so present and in the moment for that 4 minutes. It just, for me, is the closest thing to feeling alive. Didn't have an agent, nothing like that. And so I was just emailing meets hoping to get in and no one was replying to me. And then this race director in Dortmund let me into the race. And that's the race where I front ran it and ran 4:03, which was the world qualifying time. And then after that, everything changed.
Welcome back to 5 Miles Easy. Today we're joined by a current star of British track running who is fresh off an incredible run at Doha Diamond League, finishing first Brit in 4:03.72. Georgia Bell is setting her sights on qualifying for the Paris Olympics this summer, but just 5 years ago she had quit the sport entirely.
Despite some very good performances as a junior athlete and going to the US on a sports scholarship, it was injury that prevented Georgia from taking her running career much further. Instead, she got a job in London in cybersecurity, but during lockdown, she decided to lace back up her trainers and get in touch with her old track coach. Since then, Georgia's performances have skyrocketed, and since then, she's signed a professional contract with Nike. Today, we're going to hear about her journey, how she got back into running, and what she's learned in the process.
Rose, it's quite rare that you hear of athletes, especially track athletes, leaving the sport for quite a considerable amount of time and then returning to it and becoming a world-class athlete. So I'm really interested to hear Georgia's journey and how she rediscovered her passion for running.
Georgia has a really cool story, and I think it's just another example of how, A, it's never a linear journey, and B, there's always more than one way to get to the same goal. I think I can definitely relate to that because I also haven't had the most traditional way to where I'm at now. I didn't have the background that a lot of other athletes have in terms of going through the school system, the college system, and I have come at it from a very different angle of working in law before. And although sometimes that can feel like a bit of a challenge in that I don't necessarily have all those years of training with me, I always try and reframe it as a strength because that's kind of all you can do. You can only work with what you've got. And it does give me a lot of perspective. It gives me that perspective that running isn't the only thing out there, but also that I'm just doing what used to be my hobby as my job. And I think that kind of passion and just love for it fuels so much of both my performances, but also my training, especially when it gets hard and you're not having a good day. I can still kind of go back to that and remember that I am so lucky to just be doing something that I did for fun for so many years.
Yeah, you're so right. That is such a strength to have because I do feel like for someone like you, it could be very easy to compare yourself to the traditional way that athletes make it to a world stage in the marathon, where they've kind of come from shorter distances, worked their way up, and they've been in the sport for so many years. So I can imagine that could be hard, but actually what you've just described as having that perspective is so true that you're reminding yourself of what's really important and why you do it.
Yeah, I think ultimately you always just got to work with what you've got. And there's always a way to frame it in a positive way and use it as a strength. And Georgia's story is exactly that, really. She has had that bad experience in the US that made her quit, but she has used it to completely reframe running and come at it from a different angle.
And she just seems to be loving running and racing now. She just seems happy to be in the sport. And I guess for me, what I can relate to is now that she's enjoying racing because she's happy, it's kind of the journey I've been on in trying to find my love for racing again and realizing I've got to be doing the races that excite me. And I feel like that's what she's kind of done. She's not come back and thought, right, I'm going to be going to the Olympics. She's been on a very gradual journey of, okay, what do I want to do next that's going to excite me? And then step by step, that's got her to this stage. So it's really cool to see that just doing what you love can really get you places.
I think that's such a fundamental point, because even when we love what we do, racing, pushing our bodies to their absolute maximum is hard. And not every day is going to be a walk in the park. Not every day is going to be fun. There are going to be those days when it's hard to get out the door at any level. We all have those days. But if you can come back to that fundamental why of why you're doing it, and that fundamental happiness and excitement around running, that's what will get you through the tough days as well.
Yes, absolutely. I'm really excited to hear what Georgia has to say. So shall we get on with the episode?
Let's do it.
Georgia, thank you so much for joining us for 5 Miles Easy. You've had such an exciting journey that we can't wait to delve into. But the first question that we ask all our guests is, what is your why when it comes to running?
Thanks for having me, guys. I was thinking about this question before I came on, and I've had kind of different phases of running where my why has changed. So I've had whys in the past with running where I want to see how good I can be, or I've had whys when I just want to get out of the house for a plod to have a bit of a break. But I think at the moment, definitely this phase and this summer, I think for me, the why is all about racing and just the feeling that you get from racing. And it's kind of a hard thing to describe, I guess, but just the feeling when you go into a race, the world kind of stops. You're so present and in the moment for that 4 minutes or however long you're running for. It just, for me, is the closest thing to feeling alive. And then as soon as the race ends, you go back into the normal flow. But I just think I've been obsessed with that feeling since I've got back into elite running recently. And it just means that I'm just living for race day and living for that kind of moment that I don't think you can get very many other places in life.
Yeah, I don't think we've had that one before.
That's such a good one. And I
feel like I've gone really philosophical there to start.
Yeah, no, it was really a new one that I hadn't heard yet. I love that one.
And I suppose you've got to, it's so important to have that, because you've got to be so focused there is no time in a 1500 metre to lose concentration or lose your focus. So yeah, that's such a good one to have.
It's strange because it's just you're in the race and your senses are just so heightened. You're kind of running off instinct. You are making decisions, but you're also reacting to what's going on in the race. You can be in a really loud stadium, but everything just gets so zoned in and so quiet when you're the athletes running together. And I just think it just makes you get goosebumps. It makes you so excited for running. And I just think it's hard to replicate in other places in life.
Yeah, that's such a unique thing to a track race as well, I feel, because do you find say a road race, you wouldn't necessarily get the same feeling?
Yeah, I think definitely. And for you guys with your distances, with how long you guys run for, it might be a very different experience if you're going for hours. But I just think the fact it's in a track race, you usually have big stadiums around you, and it's just a couple of minutes that you really are pushing yourself for. Yeah, I think it probably is quite unique to track.
And you have had such an incredible couple of years. I think a lot of our listeners might only know you from these past kind of 2 years of performances, but we know you're also very good as a junior. So can you just take us back to how running actually started for you? And I guess, was your why any different back then?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's changed so much over the years. I think I was just a good youngster with running, showed some promise on sports day, kind of beat some of the boys in the races, and then some of the parents spoke to my parents and said we need to get Georgia down into the club system. So started club running, and was a good junior. That led me to go on to go to the US on a scholarship for running as well, on a track scholarship, which there are great opportunities out there. But wasn't consistent, my performance across those years. So had very up and down performances. And ultimately, when I went to the US, was never as good as I was when I was in the UK, never ran faster. So it hasn't been a linear process at all. And then once I left the US, I totally stopped running. And so I guess my why with running had gone completely. And then got back into running over COVID when, there wasn't much else to do. And then at that point, that why was just to get out of the house, to, refresh your mind. It gradually became, okay, I want to see how well I can do by entering a park run, adding a bit of competitiveness to it. And then it was like I was ready to take it to that next level of competitiveness again by getting back on the track. So yeah, I have been doing that now for the past kind of 2 years and have had a bit of a breakthrough, I guess, this year, since January, really. So not very long.
Yeah, it's a really, really cool story and journey that you've been on. So when you went to the US, did you have it in your mind that you wanted to become pro at that stage? Is that why you went there on a scholarship?
I was just trying to put off life, if I'm honest. Put off being an adult and having to go into the working world. Like, I knew that, going to university in the US for a master's was a way that you could study for another 2 years, live in an amazing part of the world, kind of have that experience of living abroad. So I was kind of just thinking short term, that's what it would be. But I did think, given that running had been a big part of my life since I was young, that would kind of be where I'd end up. Like, I'd be doing some kind of professional running. And yeah, that obviously wasn't the case.
So what was it that made you quit? Because as you said, it's been a massive part of your life up until that moment.
Yeah.
And then it looked like you're kind of on a good trajectory, even though you said there was a bit of inconsistency. So what caused the U-turn?
So I think, when I went over to the US, I was a 2:03 800 meter runner. I had done quite well at our internal nationals. So I was a good level. I wasn't going to the Olympics. But then when I went over to the US, my performances just went downhill. And by the end of that 2 years that I was there, I was running significantly slower. I wasn't enjoying racing. The feeling that I just said there about how I was living for race day, it was the total opposite. I would be so disillusioned, just waiting for it to be over. And so I think when I got to the end of my college career, it wasn't a viable option for me to go professionally anyway. I mean, I can't imagine what team would have wanted me back then. I think I finished my collegiate career, and my last race for the 1500, I did a 4-minute 35 or something. So, you're not going to be signed with anyone for that. And I just think that mentally and physically, I was just totally burnt out, and I just needed a break, was ready to just become a normal person, experience normal things. And then, I thought I wouldn't ever get back into running, but here we are.
Yeah, I was going to ask that if you thought maybe at the time you'd just have a break and maybe later down the line you might get back into it, but you didn't think that at the time?
No, I just thought that, maybe I'd be, going for runs as a mum one day, or doing it for health and fitness, but never at an elite level again. And I didn't go for a run for I don't know how long. I think almost a year or something, just literally was ready to hang up the shoes, throw out all the running clothes, and just, stop altogether.
What do you think it was in that process that caused, I guess, the decline in your performances, but also probably quite linked the loss of love for running? Was it the US system? Was it your training? Do you know, what do you put it down to?
Yeah, I think it's just an amalgamation of things. I think being a really good youngster is great in some ways, but it also means that your expectation is very high from the get-go. And so anything under that, if you don't win that same championship again, it's a downgrade. And so I think as everyone else kind of caught up to me, or as I got worse, that obviously kind of impacted your love of it. You want to do things that you're really good at. I think over in the US, it's quite a well-known thing that it's a very mileage-heavy system, and they just have so many athletes on their roster that it's kind of settle into what we've got, and if you can handle it, you'll maybe be able to do well. But for me, I'm not a very high mileage athlete, was there for 2 years and had at least 2, if not more, stress fractures. So I was just constantly recovering from injury and never fit really. So it was difficult to ever be better than I was in the UK. And just the knock-on impact of that, it's not a great feeling going out onto a track race when you know that you're not fit, that you haven't done that training, but there's a big expectation of you because you're on a scholarship. So I think, that was just tricky, and, obviously didn't make me very excited to race.
Yeah, I can imagine that's such a difficult environment to be in when you have gone for that purpose and there's not that much else, you're there just for for running and to kind of perform.
Yeah.
So that must be really difficult. You mentioned you got back into it, started with a park run, and then you kind of found yourself back on the track. Can you just tell us a bit more about that comeback and how it all came about?
Yeah, so with COVID, I started running again. I also really got into cycling, started doing lots of mileage through that. And then that was just a build up of fitness over a few years. And then doing parkrun was probably one of the first. I think I might have done a run through event as well, just kind of the first measure of how fit you are. And so I think after I did a couple of those events and saw the times were decent, that made me think I'm actually ready to get back on the track again. Like I had that feeling back of wanting to race, wanting to get some spikes and go for it. And so I did a 5K, which was a new event for me on the track, but that kind of went well. And then after that, I just got back in touch with my old coach, who we had kind of parted ways, obviously, when I went to the US, but we're still on good terms, and just said, would you be interested in coaching me again? And yeah, we've been working together now for about 2 years. And yeah, it's been great.
That's so cool. And then obviously it has been great because your times have kept coming down. And then you were British indoor champion over 1,500 meters and then fourth at the world indoors, which is just amazing because you're suddenly on this world stage just performing with the best. And that now means that I guess the races that you're in are very different to maybe what they once were. So you've gone from kind of those regional races to now on a world stage at Diamond League. So you just Doha Diamond League, which is amazing. How do you now manage the expectations of your performances now you're up against, you know, these world-class athletes?
Yeah, it's a good question. Obviously, it is a big jump from doing like a British Milers Club meet, which are still really high standard, but, you know, it's not sold out stadiums versus coming back from Doha Diamond League on Friday. That was the loudest stadium that I've been in, like completely sold out, like incredible athletes on the start line. So I think for me, I'm just really enjoying racing so much and just not letting myself get overwhelmed with any expectation. Like I know training's going really well. I'm just enjoying every race. And I think that's just translating really nicely into how the races are turning out. You know, like I'm just not putting too much pressure on myself, just enjoying every moment.
What do you think is so different about when you were back in the US and you struggled with that expectation and you weren't enjoying racing to now? I mean, obviously you're in incredible form, which helps, but it's still a huge amount of expectation, particularly on that world stage. So how has your approach to managing that changed that you can do it so well now?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I think I was just immature when I was younger. I'm being a bit harsh on myself there. You know, being in your young 20s, I think is you are just a bit more immature as you get older. And now I just realised that it's such a unique experience. Like I'm so grateful coming to it from a second time around. So I'm not kind of taking anything for granted. And I think, over in the US, I knew I wasn't in shape, so that's why racing was hard. Whereas now that isn't the case, you know, touch wood. I'm like injury free and have been for a couple of years. So I know the training's in a good place. So I think if you can just control your mindset and use that to your advantage, like of course you're going to have a great race because, you know, you've done everything that you need to do to get there. And the opportunity's there for you.
It's time to thank our sponsor for this episode, Veloforte.
Now, as our listeners will know by now, we are both big fans of using the Veloforte products in our training. And I have to say, Steph, I had a really hard session today. And all I could think about in those last couple of reps was having a malto shake at the end. The cold cinnamon and vanilla shake at the end of a hard session just hits differently.
Oh, it tastes so good, doesn't it? I've been absolutely loving the Energy Chews. They're a great alternative to gels, and I've been using them on those longer runs, especially in my training for Two Oceans. They came in very handy and they're so delicious. I love the apple and cinnamon flavour.
And the best bit is, because Veloforte uses only real food ingredients and nothing artificial, you can trust what you're putting in your body, and it digests so much better to synthetic alternatives.
And you can understand every ingredient on the back, which is not always the case with these types of products.
Thanks to Veloforte for supporting this podcast. And if you would like 30% off the Veloforte products, head to veloforte.com and use the code 5miles at checkout.
Do you have any tips on mindset? Because you mentioned you're just focusing on, enjoying the racing, which is amazing and that's really important. But are there any other tools that you use to make sure that you get the best out of yourself?
Yeah, so when the camera comes along to you, like on the start line, I will always smile and like wave. And I think it's just a good way of like keeping your heart rate low, tricking yourself into, thinking this is going to be fun. Like, even though it's going to hurt, like this is actually going to be a lot of fun. And I think if you're standing there like really stressed, really worried, like your heart rate will go up, it will impact your race. And so that's just a small trick that I do, smile on the start line, even if just for a second or two, just to remember to kind of keep calm. And I think just, it's okay to have adrenaline. Like, I've got loads of adrenaline for a race as well, but don't let it turn into fear. Like, don't be worried about things. Don't think of all the things that go wrong. Like, have your race plan and just be so excited to go out there and execute that. This is just coming back to me now, but I had a sports psychologist at Berkeley. We were all given one. And one of the things he said to me was like fear, and he called it false evidence appearing real. And so he was like, when you have the fear, like you're thinking of things that haven't happened and you're worried about them. And it's just like, make sure that you don't let that overwhelm you. Like, just try and block it out. And I was like, oh, that kind of stuck with me. And now I just try and do that when I race.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's something Rose and I have spoken about quite a lot, is kind of worrying about what could happen in a race.
Yeah.
And then you bring yourself back to the moment as well. Like, you're fine in this moment. Stop worrying what could happen in a few minutes' time, because that's not happened yet.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just such a waste of energy, and like, you need all your energy. Like,
Yeah.
It's going to be a tough race. So just save what you can and execute it how you want to.
I love the smiling on the start line as well. There's actually some scientific evidence that smiling, as you say, it calms your nerves, but it does also like help you concentrate, and there's a real correlation between smiling and performing well in running.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
it's something I use as well in marathons. And like, when I start to struggle in those latter stages, I just make myself smile for 5 seconds, like
good.
however I'm feeling. And it's amazing like how it can shift both your mindset to, when it starts to hurt, you go into this negative mindset pattern. It can completely shift you out of that, but it also makes it feel so much easier.
Yeah.
And you can suddenly feel completely different. So it's a trick that I use all the time, and I love it.
Yeah, if you guys see me like smiling down the home straight,
Smiling in
you're
pain.
like, oh yeah, she's just trying to push through that.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so what's actually changed in your training now? Because, you said when you were in the US, you struggled with injury and inconsistency, whereas now presumably you've been training consistently and you're not injured. So
Yeah.
what differences have you found in your new training setup?
Yeah, so I think I'm just doing straight half of the mileage that I was doing out in the US when it comes to running. So I was probably on close to like 55, 60 miles a week out there. And now I do 30 pretty much, like bang on every week. So that's one thing. So that's just allowed me to have building blocks of years, rather than you train, you're in a boot, you take time out, you come back. Like, it's just been build on build on build. And then I think the cycling has also had a big impact. Cycling around 100 miles a week for the past probably 3 years just means that it's a different kind of cardio and strength that I just didn't have before, and I think has contributed to the fitness. And then the main thing is like having a great plan to follow with Trev and the team there. So I think they've got just a fantastic program, but also it's not just the program, which I fully believe in and think, it has definitely improved me because they have great track sessions and things like that. But it's having a coach that you can go to and like work with, that you really trust. And that's Trevor on the coaching side, as in he's the man with the plan. But then they're a duo with Jenny Meadows, who was also an athlete herself, like at the world level. And as a team together, it's just a really nice mix of having a coach and a mentor, which I think just has been huge for me for improvement and getting the most out of myself.
That's so interesting. I think it's so refreshing to hear just that the same approach, you can go down so many different routes and there are so many different ways of training, and it's really just about finding what works for you.
Yeah.
As you said, the US system just didn't work for you.
Yeah.
And it's perhaps put on a pedestal for a lot of athletes, like go to the US because it's great training and you're going to get better than you can here. But sometimes it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
So I think it's so refreshing to hear that, you know, you've found a way that isn't that way and it's worked so much better for you.
And some people it totally works. Like there's some athletes who've gone to the US and they've thrived and like that's amazing. But yeah, everyone is just different, I guess.
So how do you utilize that sort of setup? So having a mentor, what would you go to Jenny for over Trev?
So I go to Jenny for race stuff. So like if we get the start list out for a race, I will go to her and be like, you know, these are the people in my race. What would you recommend with this? And she's just got so much experience because not only did she race herself, she's also a commentator for a lot of races. So she knows the athletes, she knows how their race. She'll be like, oh, I remember, you know, this athlete has got an incredible kick. So you need to watch out for her at this point. Or she'll just be, you know, really useful to if there's an approach to a session, because Trev sets the sessions, but he hasn't done a lot of the sessions, whereas Jenny has. And she'll be like, this really hurts around here. Like, this is where I expect you to be. And so it's just kind of the experience that she's had as being an athlete. You know, she advises a lot as well on how to remain calm, get the most out of the race, which I just think is so valuable. She's also, they can be really direct, which I really like. So like when she gives me, or when they say, you know, they believe in me or they believe I can run a certain time, I take it, you know, seriously, because they'll also say, no, you can't do that, you know, like it's a good level of belief, but also like realistic. And yeah, I think that's why the team in general for that group is doing so well.
And where is the team based?
So they're in Manchester. So obviously I'm based in London. So I'll try and go to Manchester where I can and go on training camps to South Africa and other places like that. But mainly Trev sets my plan remotely and then I just spend time with them on camps and yeah, head to Manchester when I can to do some important sessions too.
Wow. And it's all changed so much for you over the last couple of years and joining this incredible group. And I know you've travelled a lot too, but you've also been fitting this around a full-time job for a long time.
Yeah.
How did that work?
Now that I've stopped, I actually just look back and think, how was I doing that? As of the 1st of May, I've gone on like a sabbatical from work. So I'm only like 10 days in or something. But it's been, yeah, just to get the time back has been incredible. So yeah, I've just been working full-time. I've got a job in software in London and just mainly remote, which is the game changer, which is, to be honest, the only thing that made it possible. So I was able to cut out the commutes and train before and after work or at lunchtime. And I just had no time, is the way I would describe it. You know, I was always rushing to get to the track, rushing to get home, rushing to eat something before my next Zoom. You know, like I had my laptop in Glasgow taking calls between like the heat and the final. And it's just so nice to not have to worry about that, at least for this summer, to just like have time back in my life and be able to recover properly. So yeah, just a big juggling act, but I don't know how I did it, to be honest. And I have a lot of respect for everyone who does it, because you obviously did it as well for a bit, right?
Yeah, and I think exactly the same thing. I'm just like, how did I do it and keep going?
And yours was even worse, maybe, because you were in the office a lot, right?
Yeah, I was in the office quite a lot. I phased it down. So I was full time and then I cut a day.
Okay.
And it's funny, the more you do it, the more you're like, I don't know how I did that previous stage. And I kept cutting down. But it was like train, go to the office, train after work, sleep, get up again, repeat. And I didn't do anything else at all.
Yeah, social life just...
No.
Just
and,
no.
Yeah. And it's the recovery as well.
Yeah.
I think it's the recovery that I noticed the most, because I could fit in all my training, like just about, but there were no extras. There was no rehab, no physio, definitely no naps.
Yeah, no, so true. And that's the biggest thing that I've noticed. Like even today, I just like went to strength and conditioning before I came here, and I was able to spend like 15 minutes stretching and like 15 minutes warming up. And it's just like, I would have never have been able to do that before. I think there can be some benefits of it though, like working and doing both. Just the sense of it takes the pressure off your performance in a way, because it's like, if you're not financially reliant on it, then you're just doing it because, you know, you really love it, and, you know, just go for it in every race and see what happens. Whereas I can imagine it can be quite a lot of pressure if you know, there's big kind of bonuses, and like financially running is not the, you know, best, most lucrative sport compared with other sports. So I can see why that could be stressful if, say, you've got a family to support, something like that. So I think initially that helped, having the job, like, just meant that the pressure was off for racing. But, you know, definitely to be in the next level, I guess that's the difference between coming fourth at Worlds and winning Worlds, is like you need to be full time.
Yeah. Does that excite you then, now knowing that you don't have any of that for a while? So, you know, as Rose said, the recovery that you can now have and just the time.
Yeah.
Do you kind of think, wow, I've managed to achieve so much whilst juggling all of this. What can I do now that I have the time to fit everything else in?
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, even just like the past week has just been so good. Like, I'm just so excited for the day rather than looking at the day and being like, how on earth am I gonna do this?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, you know, definitely from a performance aspect, like, there's just things that now I'm adding in that I have time to do that should help my performance. And yeah, just recovery. I can sleep till like 9 instead of waking up at 6 and having to fit things in. So you would think that there'll be improvements there, but yeah, I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Has it made you feel more pressure, like you said?
No.
Okay, good.
No, I've got, you know, a job to come back to at the end of the summer. You know, let's see how things go. But like, that's nice. I haven't had to kind of like fully quit, so they were really understanding. I think them tuning into Glasgow helped. Steve Cram like did me a favor and was just like, Georgia Bell, you know, if she can focus, she must know that she has a shot of going to the Olympics. So I think after they heard that, they were like, okay,
it's a hint.
maybe. Whereas if I'd just gone to them and said, can I have a break over the summer, and they'd never watched running ever, they'd probably think no.
So if you'd never stepped away from the sport,
Yeah.
where do you think you'd be? Like, what have you learned from this whole journey that's got you to now? Do you feel like it was the right decision to take that time away, so you've come back with a refreshed mindset almost?
Yeah, definitely. Like, if I hadn't done that and say I just signed on with like a team somewhere in the world, joined a pro team, like, maybe I would have gone into a really good setup that was kind of personalized for me, and there'd been a great team around me, so it could have turned around. There was obviously like the potential there from the results that, you know, we've been able to get since, but I just think mentally I really needed a break, and I'm really happy that I got to, you know, have my 20s living in the US, like, because I stayed out there to work afterwards, got to just kind of do loads of things that a normal 20-year-old would do, like go on holidays with friends, or like, you know, go to festivals, whatever it might be, that you just can't do when you're running. Like, it is just a whole lifestyle commitment. And kind of doing all that, now that I've come back to it, this is something that I really want, I really care about, and I'm just focused in a way that I would never have been able to be, I think, when I was that age and kind of at that point in my life.
If you could go back and say something to yourself at that age when you were struggling in the US and felt that incredible amount of pressure to perform and lost your love for something that was such a big part of your life, what would you say to how old are you, 23, 22-year-old Georgia?
22-year-old Georgia. Yeah, I think I'd just say not everyone's journey is like, you go to college, then you sign a pro contract, then you make it to the Olympics. You know, like, there are stories of people doing things that are different, and like, if you're not enjoying yourself, then that's the most important thing. Like, you need to be happy with what you do, because if you're happy, then the results will come, you know? And so I think I just thought the thing that made it even sadder when I finished my collegiate career is because I just thought, I've just not achieved my potential, you know? Like, I was good, I haven't made it, and now I'm quitting, and like, that's it. It's not like I'm going to come back when I'm like 28 and do something special. Like, you're the best when you're like this age. So I wish I could have, like, just said to myself, like, don't worry, like, we'll have a little comeback when you're ready.
Yeah, I think that's so important for people to hear, because I think running just is a roller coaster. You know, there are just those times where you lose all motivation and you hate it.
Yeah.
And just knowing, just almost trusting that, you know, it's not for me right now, but maybe one day it will be. And
I think the most important thing, is just that you enjoy it. Like, if you're not, then it's just like anything, you know, like, if you really hate your job, like, is it you know, you have to decide if it's really worth it. But, you know, it probably isn't if you're just hating it. And I think there's just so many really interesting stories now in running, maybe because I'm just more aware of them because of my situation and how I've kind of taken a break and come back. But like of so many athletes who have been able to come back from situations where you thought that they wouldn't, like so many mothers that have come back, like Ellie St. Pierre winning World Indoors a year after giving birth. Like she probably thought, I'm never gonna get back to what I was. And then you just see those stories and hear that and you think, wow. And the woman who won the 800 meters indoors was 38.
Wow.
That's incredible.
So it's just like, wow, like that's on paper, you wouldn't think, just naively, I just wouldn't know that that's kind of almost possible. But like there are all these different trajectories in the sport, and I think it's nice to see. And then on the other hand, you have Phoebe Gill, who on the weekend like is 17 and is like breaking world records. So like there are just so many different stories. Like not every path is the same, it's not all linear. And yeah, I just think it's good for people to know that.
It almost sounds like just letting go of that expectation.
Yeah.
And as you say, just enjoying it, doing it for the journey is where the results come from.
Yeah, and that's exactly how it started when I got back into it. Like I didn't get back into running, doing a park run thinking I'm going to world champs, because my times would have not agreed with that. And I would have been, you know, downhearted by that. But I just got into it because I was enjoying it. You know, it was great to be around the running community again, enjoyed every small improvement, and then the accumulation of that over a period of time has resulted into, yeah, everything that has happened this year so far. So
yeah, I love that. So what's next for you? What are your goals?
So I have got, the track season has started. It's come around really quickly. Have done 2 races so far, a 5K on the track and then the Doha Diamond League last week. So the main focus between now and the 30th of June is running the Olympic qualifying time, the 1500 metres. So I have a couple of shots at that between now and the end of June. One will be at Prefontaine in 2 weeks, which the start list came out and they are just insane. So that will be really fun. I've actually got an 800 metres this week, which is going to be interesting because it's been 7 years since I've done that.
Wow.
So like that will be a big shock to the system, but it will be fun, I think. I hope. And then some championships. So fingers crossed I get selected for Europeans in June in Rome. And then obviously the big goal is trying to make the Olympics this summer and join Rose on the team. So it's going to be like an incredibly tough thing to make the Olympics, but I do think it is, you know, achievable. I think, you know, running the Olympic qualifying time is totally possible. And then, you know, it's all about racing at British Champs on the 30th of June. So, yeah, it's going to be a busy summer.
That's so exciting. So you've basically got races pretty much, well, more than once a month and so much travel. So how do you actually plan that? You know, how do you travel and fit all the training in? And
I know it's a lot, really. But yeah, it's pretty much a once a week race, or maybe once every 2 weeks a race now for the summer schedule. So it's a lot of racing, but you just adjust. The race is usually on a Friday or Saturday, so you just make sure that you adjust your kind of harder sessions to earlier on in the week, and then kind of take a few kind of easier days, perhaps on a travel day. But yeah, it's just the track schedule, so you just got to adjust.
It fascinates me because as a marathon runner who has kind of 2 big races a year maximum and then a couple of half marathons thrown in there, I'm just thinking like, how on earth would you do that?
Our races are like 4 minutes though, Rose. Yours are like 2.5 hours.
Just as exciting, stressful, all the same emotions go into it. So
easier to recover.
I'm so impressed.
Yeah, what I find crazy is when there's different rounds and you have to race back-to-back days. You know?
Well, for the sprinters, they do like 3 races in a day. So like, I think that would be worse. Like having to do like just more mentally, like you're
the
up, you're
adrenaline.
down. Like there were so many sprinters just like napping at Worlds because they can't go home because they don't have long enough to do that, but they have to chill out fully before they get zoned in again for the next race. So yeah, heats are the worst. Like heats are genuinely probably the worst bit about track racing, just because there's a lot of pressure on them, and like if you get it wrong, like you don't make a final. Whereas finals are more like fun. You can just go for it.
Yeah.
So it's like you want to do everything you can to make the final, but really you want to do the minimum amount of work to get there. And just as everyone is so good, like they can end up being really tactical races. Like our heat in Glasgow was 4:04 and the final was 4:03. Whereas like some of the other heats were like 4:18. So like you don't really want to be putting that much effort into your heat, but yeah, they're not fun. You're lucky you don't have to go through those.
Yeah, it's hard because you can have a race plan, I guess, but you have to be so reactive to what other people's race plans are.
Exactly, yeah. And it just depends who you get in your heat. If you get a really good heat, then that race is going to be fast. Whereas like if you get, an easier heat, then that's huge for you, like, and huge for the competition in general. Yeah.
Wow, that sounds like such an exciting summer. And I'm just so excited to see how all of this unfolds, because your story is incredible.
Thank you.
And I think it's just incredible to see kind of how much of a roller coaster it's been. And then, it's just such an amazing success story at the end of it.
Yeah, I hope that, if anyone just kind of like hears the story or, like comes across this in some way, like if it's not going 100% perfectly to plan, I kind of wish that I had heard some more stories like that when I was, quitting, not knowing that I would come back. So yeah, it's been a really fun year, and it's also just changed really quickly. Like before January, I was, like a 4:06 runner, unsigned. Like things can change really quickly. So like now, I've become a British champion, become a world finalist, got a Nike contract. None of that. I wouldn't have thought anything like that was possible even in like December. So it is just, there are opportunities out there. They can change quickly.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I think I've definitely had times like that when it's just, I felt so far off where I need to be.
Yeah.
And either coming back from injury, and there's that period where it's just a real slog.
Yeah.
And nothing's falling into place. Everything's a struggle.
Yeah.
You're grinding through the sessions and you like set out like every session. I'm like, it's just not going to be a good one.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, like in the space of 2 weeks, it can kind of all fall into place.
Yeah.
And I kind of had it a bit this winter where I went through kind of a series of not major dips, but just cumulatively hiccups that came at the worst possible time. And I was like trying to prove fitness for the Olympics.
That must have been so stressful.
The pressure.
Not just for her, for everyone else as well.
Yeah, it was definitely a stressful few months. And it did, I think that's the one time in my career I've really questioned, like, do I still love this? But it is so funny. And literally in the space of 3 weeks, it all turned around.
Yeah.
And now I'm back on the high, loving it. Sessions are going well. And I look back, I'm like, oh, it wasn't that bad, really.
Yeah. That's why I think it's just so important to like get it done. There's been so many sessions where it's like, I'm on my own. I do a lot of training on my own. It's like pouring rain. It's miserable. I'm like, oh, I really don't want to do this. But it's like, just get it done, because like every building block is important. And as you say, it can feel so bad, and then 2 weeks later it like clicks and you're fit.
Yeah, I think everyone should hear that. Like, no matter what level you are, there are those sessions where you get halfway through and you think, this is just awful, like I may as well stop now. But just remembering, like you say, just finish it.
Yeah.
And you've ticked it off, and it is another building block. So
and we find it hard as well, don't we?
Yeah.
I feel like people think they're like, oh, like it's so easy for them. It's like, no. There are those sessions where you're like, I felt terrible. Like I've warmed up for sessions sometimes and like, am I going to drop out of the session? Because it's just so, I feel so bad. But then it's like, you just get it done and then you feel better afterwards. And then obviously, it all contributes.
Yeah, it's all relative.
And I sometimes feel like it's actually those sessions that I take the most confidence from.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, I felt awful and I still got a decent job done.
Yeah.
Even if I didn't hit my targets, I finished it and my effort was there.
Yeah.
And if I can get through that on a bad day, then on a good day, I'm flying.
And it's just, winning those mental battles. Like, the sessions where I think I'm not going to be able to get through this and then I get them done, I just like remember those times when I'm like warming up for a race. It's like, you didn't think you'd be able to do that and you did. So...
yeah, we'll take that into all of your races for the rest of the summer and we will be watching to see what happens. Thank you so much, Georgia, for coming on and sharing your incredible story and so many really cool insights to wrap up, we have one final question which we ask all our listeners. What is your high five me moment? So a moment that either in your running career or just life in general, where you would just give yourself the biggest high five.
Probably, like, there have been other bigger events this year that you would think would be the high five me moment, like, you know, British champs, like winning a championship is amazing, or like pinching myself that I'm at a Diamond League. But actually the most like proud I've been of myself, I think, was just that race in Dortmund at the beginning of the year that kick-started this whole process. I didn't realise that you need an agent to get into races. You know, it's all very like difficult. And I was just at the beginning of this year, unsponsored, didn't have an agent, nothing like that. And so I was just emailing meets, hoping to get in, race directors, and no one was replying to me. And then this race director in Dortmund let me into the race because there was a cancellation, and that's the race where I was just determined to have a great race. I like front ran it and ran 4:03, which was the world qualifying time. And then after that, like everything changed. All my opportunities opened up. And so even though it was like a lower key race in loads of ways, it was kind of the moment for me that changed everything and started this whole kind of comeback. So I think that moment was definitely like my high five moment. Like, you made it happen.
That's so awesome. It's mad when you think about it, just like one small thing can just change the whole path.
Yeah, definitely. The organizer found me afterwards and was like, I'm so happy I let you in, like, as a last minute entry. And I was like, I'm so happy. Thank you so much. So yeah, that was a really special moment for me.
Yeah, definitely deserve a high five for that.
Yeah.
Well, as Rose said, we can't wait to see how you get on this summer. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, guys.
Thanks for joining us for 5 Miles Easy.
See you next time.